Hey everybody, this is a re-upload of my KartSim's reviews video. KartSim contacted me about some things they weren't quite happy about. So we agree on some points, disagree on some others, but with polite communication we came to an agreeable solution for both of us. So I've taken out a part of the video that was about their professional software. They did not ask for this, but in hindsight I felt it was fairly unreasonable. This is a consumer card sim review, but my opinions, criticism is still in there. However, they wanted me to annotate the parts where they felt it was not clear enough that I was expressing opinion rather than stating it as if it were a fact. All of the sim stuff is still in there, just annotated as per request of KartSim. Before we start though, a few words about the whole thing. I kind of feel like we haven't evolved with the technology that we've created with social media and in the internet. It's as old as the internet is. We often end up with far more polarized views and pitchforks being raised compared to old school face-to-face communication, right? So I think everybody falls into this trap every now and then. You know, you get angry on the internet, and I think it contributes to the polarized world where everybody is just angry at somebody too often over something unimportant for no real reason. Terabytes wasted and hours of your life wasted while being unnecessarily angry. I think it's a trap that is very easy to fall into. In this example, KartSim was outspoken in their first comments on my video, and my first reactions as well were, "What? This doesn't make any sense." And then Austin Ogonovsky, who I don't mind as much as some people may think, was quick to jump on the bandwagon, evidence that all sim developers are evil, which of course just adds fuel to that unevolved brain of ours, fire that's raging that we cannot communicate over the internet. So, KartSim, they contacted me via email. We had a polite conversation, and it turns out, and I think that sincerely, they are passionate sim developers. I'm a passionate sim guy. It wasn't that hard to arrive at a solution that was fine for both of us. So that's what this bit is about. I feel a tiny little internet storm was once again raging unnecessarily. Only if we couldn't resolve this in a friendly manner, then perhaps at some point it would be a good idea to dust off those pitchforks, but it didn't even come nearly that far. So just some words I want to say to make this very long video even longer. Alright, video starts now. Bye bye. Hey everybody, a karting video. This is a long video. Timestamps to get you to the places you might want to see. We are reviewing KartKraft, Kart Racing Pro and KartSim. Just from a physics and force feedback perspective, a few words on some gameplay things here and there. So only looking at the X30 type 125cc rear brakes only experience. So I hope you enjoy that. I try to cover as much rambly physics things as I can. That's why the video is long, but use the timestamps or just watch it in chunks if you don't want to watch it all at once. Enjoy! I'm gonna play all these sims, not for more than like 4, 5, 6 hours, good enough to really get a feel for it, set it up properly, get going, get good, and then have some opinions about force feedback, handling of the cards, how it differs from what I expect, how these games differ from each other. So let's see what comes out. But of course I am not a real kart racer, so I might do things wrong, I don't know. I'm also not super knowledgeable about the intricacies of these cars and the setup, so don't treat this, whatever comes out of playing these games and all these videos, don't treat them as fact, just, you know, my opinion on these, and perhaps the information is useful. So this intro will probably be on all the videos, or I make one big video, I don't know yet. KartKraft. That works a lot better. I tried it when it was first released, it barely ran and issues didn't run. It's not perfect yet. I do very much like the UI, which is probably just an Unreal Engine thing. The navigation with right click for back, and it's quite natural. Also very easy to set up your controls and your view angle, seating position, horizon pitch angle, the camera pitch angle, stabilization, the setup all of the game and the settings. Perfect. Triple screen support. It is Unreal Engine. It does melt PCs. In order to capture this, I'm running at 50% resolution scale, which I'll probably do a bit more. That's just, it's fairly heavy. Of course, also in VR it works. I haven't tried it in VR yet. My specs are in the description. But more importantly, how does it drive? How is the force feedback? So I've been doing, as in all these videos, X30 type kart, rear braking, direct drive. At Genk, Belgium track, quite nice. Oh, and I'm dying. No, I'm not dying. UI, you can drag the things you want of the UI to where you want them. That's very intuitive, very nice. I did find the force feedback is frame rate dependent. So if you set the frame rate limit to 30, which you shouldn't do, it's terrible, you feel very choppy force feedback. So it's the same in Automobilista, but modern sims you would expect them to separate that properly. But somehow it is still tied to the frame rate. So that's a bit of a downside, but let's do a bit of driving, because now obviously I spent some time with this and I got to a 54, a high 54, which is about 9/10 I think of the absolute quickest track laps. So I'm not ultra terrible. I really like the feel in a way of this sim. It is incredibly easy to control the rear of the kart on the brakes. It seems to start to... You hear the engine lose RPM. I don't know if it is from the clutch that is not modeled in AMS. But it seems to be very easy at low pedal pressure to get the back to sort of move a bit. But it doesn't spin you out. It's very stable. Like there, see? It's very easy to scrub the speed by the brakes, so that's super stable there. It's very direct being a kart, and this feels very light. It also feels very oversteery, in the sense that my steering angle will decide if I'm oversteering or not. And my cars in AMS kinda did that, and I was wondering, is that right or not? I still don't know if it's right or not, but it is nice to see that basically this sim seems to think it might be that way. So if super easy, I just steered a bit too much. The reason is, of course, with these karts, the more you steer, the more you jack the car, and all the load on the rear tires goes to the outside tire. But the more I steer, basically only the outside rear tire is accelerating the car, and that turns it around very rapidly, of course. I changed the setup a bit with less caster, so it's 11 degrees, 11.5. Lowered the seat, so there is less weight transfer. I did a couple of changes, tire pressure changes, to make it less direct. So what you saw there, that spin would have happened earlier with the default setup and my drive style. But let's do a couple of laps, see how we get on. I'm a bit rusty, so of course talking and driving is always rusty. I've been driving front wheel drive touring cars, but it is very easy to be on the limit with brakes or turn on the brakes and just be careful. I mean, that's steering too much, you get oversteer, but that's not like, you can do that and it's fine. That controllability is very nice and very reminiscent of how I think it is in my own AMS creations. So you're not afraid of hitting the brakes and turning it around. It's very hard to spin on the brakes, which is almost, I wonder, should it be harder? Should it be easier, I mean, to turn the car around? Of course you can, if you're stupid, which I'm very good at. But overall it is very accepting of braking, which is, I think, quite a feat, because that's pretty hard to do. Of course, the same reason why power oversteer happens the more you steer. When you start to counter steer, the same sort of happens, but then the inside wheel does more braking. So it sort of stabilizes itself under braking. It should do anyway. So it's probably a good test in a kart sim. Can you be on the limit of braking with the rear axle and not spin out instantly? I think that's a very good sign. Like there. No drama. The steering is also properly direct. Oh. I'm being a bad driver here, so I'm sorry about that. Let's see if we can actually do a lap like a 55 at some point. You can also see I managed to abuse the proper UI where you can position things so that lap timer is actually not positioned properly. I'm that smart. So very pleasantly surprised. I think in a lot of ways this could be kart-like. But remember what I said in the disclaimer, I am also not really a kart guy, an expert. And that's why I'm trying all these games, to at least figure out how the other games do it. So perhaps I can learn something for my own cars in AMS. So that's so easy to brake into that turn, no drama whatsoever. And always, if I turn more, I spin around. But that's... These days with direct drive wheels, you get a good feel and you feel it load up. And it's easy, I find it easy to not steer too far, because you are warned, because you see the oversteer happening, you feel the steering load up. So not doing that is easy. But if you have an entry-level low torque wheel with a dead zone in the center like the old Logitech wheels used to have, then it's probably a lot harder to drive on the limit. Forceyback is quite noisy, so I mentioned it is frame rate dependent. I've also had the filtering set to max, and I'm only running 10 Newton meters maximum torque with a lot of inertia and damping. I've got my damping at 69, my inertia at 42 roughly, in order to make the wheel feel a bit more weighty, because sometimes it wants to sort of snap back very violently. So excessive, well, it's not excessive, quite a bit of damping and inertia to add a bit of natural weight to the wheel feels good in my hands. But it is very noisy, so the reason I'm not using 15 or 20 is that it's very bouncy and very noisy. It's a bit better, I think, than when I last did some laps, because now I have the frame rate locked at 120, and that you feel graininess, like perhaps it's road texture or tire, I don't know what it is. You feel that graininess frequency increase if the frame rate is higher. And now I'm running a consistent frame rate. The spikes don't seem super bad, but I'm gonna up the forceyback. So now let's say 80 Newton meters, always 180 degrees or even a bit less, but for this game I think 180 is fine. So you get that direct steering, very, very important. The stiffer you set, the higher you set the torque, I also keep increasing the damping. So let's do 80% damping and 60% inertia. This will be different for every forceyback system out there. So these are just values that this is quite weighty now with not the game running. This is just the inertia and damper effect. So let's try that. So let's see how noisy it feels with more torque now that I have a consistent frame rate. Oh, it's definitely heavy. You definitely feel more graininess, road graininess or whatever it is. So when I was practicing, I thought that perhaps the bumpiness is extreme and you see my wheel shake a bit, but I'm not so sure if it is. Again, this is maximum filtering in-game already, and it still feels very unfiltered. So many explanations for that as I master that turn. Noise in perhaps a laser scan, I don't know what it uses. Instability or just some noise in the physics. Engine, tires, is all very lightweight, stiff stuff. It's easy to get a bit of oscillation and noise there, undamped chassis, who knows. So this is at lower torque because of the bumps. You're working harder than the torque would suggest. But the thing is, sometimes the curbs, you feel them less than the overall road bumpiness. So I'm not convinced this noisiness of the forceyback, despite maximum filtering, is actually realistic or if it's laser scan, if it's physics oscillations or anything. But it's very usable, very stiff off center. That's very important because all the steering happens like in 30, 45 degrees. And direct drive wheels can be stiff right from the center. I'm driving like a twat, I know that. But it's very nice that it's immediately stiff, so you are warned of steering too much into the turns. I like this track. I'm driving like a complete idiot. Let me turn the force shield back down just a bit and do a bit better. So my gain is at 65%. I don't feel a lot of clipping, so that's probably okay. It does seem to be very close or at clipping. And filtering is at 100. No minimum force, no dead zone, no invert. That would be scary. Top marks for the control assignments. Works very easy, very well. So now 12.5 Newton meters. Oh, yeah, that... Oh! What I do take seriously, as you all know, is my engine throttle mapping. Ah, I love that drag and drop UI, it's great. At low throttle the engine doesn't really do, so I'm like 30% throttle now, 4000 RPM, we've got nothing. And this could be completely right. Dyno data at part throttle is very rare, but I think you need too much throttle to get torque, especially at low revs. It's basically idling, so that means gradually going on the throttle, sort of nothing, everything. We changed this in Automobilista, at least optionally, and not everybody is happy with that, neither am I, but the way we've learned it in all the sims, almost all the sims, is that you have to start with so much throttle at corner exit, which is not always realistic because engines tend to have a lot of torque at low revs. Even if you just have 25 or 50% throttle, at low revs that gives you pretty much all the engine torque. Possibly, no data for this, obviously. It doesn't seem to be the case here, and that means you need about half throttle just to idle at like a constant speed, drive at a constant speed, and then the last half throttle or quarter throttle is what you have to sort of apply. The weird thing is, if this was different and a bit of throttle gave me all the torque, as might be realistic, that would feel oversteery to people who are not used to that and have been driving sims with possibly incorrectly modeled throttle engine torque behavior. Anyway, it seems unresponsive here, just like vanilla R Factor and most other sims as the Corsa. Although the recent update, they say with Competizione they changed something. I have yet to test. I hope they improved it. So that means throttle is easy to apply, because by the time you're full throttle, that's only the point where you actually get a push. But feeding it in, I don't think is the way it should be, but I'm not super convinced, and I don't have part throttle engine torque data for this engine at all. So keep that in mind, grain of salt. Perhaps see, while I'm sort of getting less bad, is that just how easy it is to scrub a bit too much on corner exit, lose a bit of speed, not be smooth. The steering wheel position is so crucial. You can always make correct where the kart is going. But if you do too much of that on corner exit, you just lose a bit. So keeping it smooth is very important, I find. Here a little lift and then smaller steering. But the thing with karts, it's not so much steering because you barely turn the wheel. It's more sort of applying a force almost, like reacting a little bit. It's not motion almost. Here lift a little. If I go flat out there I can, but will slide. This corner exit, I haven't done that well. At least no bogging down, but still not fast. Slight lift. A slight lift does a big drop in engine torque. Ah, that was a nice minimum speed I maintained. Killer curb. Micro lift. Ah, too much sliding. It takes a while for the acceleration of the car to return. There it's a trade-off of being flat out but sliding a bit too much, or lifting a little bit there on the double left-hander. Too much sliding. Ooh, killer curb. It takes almost nothing to get too much oversteer. And again, this is with a setup that I think I changed towards understeer already. See, now I'm going flat out. You can get those slides, but just slower, melting your tires away. I don't think tire wear is modeled. So easy to turn on the brakes, it's ridiculous almost. I cannot be that good. Again, like with the 4C being a direct drive wheel, able to really build up force right off center. Helps a lot, of course. Having good load cell pedals helps me a bit with the braking. You can see my race car inputs hard on and then slow off. Well, I don't know if my webcam is good enough to show you those thin red lines, probably not. So here it would be important to get a nice exit, that you're not sliding and you get the maximum acceleration. Here that combined braking and entering, and then on the throttle early while not dying there on the wall. And here a bit of throttle modulation. Here you want a good exit as well. Sliding on exit is quite deadly. Easy to control but just costs you time. This is not, you can do this flat out before you know it, you're sliding there as well. So I'm using a little lift. Again, I'm a second too slow probably. So only a few hours with the game now and not an alien. But remember, if I, okay, super easy to do that when you steer too much. So the impressive thing is that you can balance the kart so precisely. With my skill, it is limited, but fairly precisely, probably more than being battered in real life by 2Gs and the bumps. I wouldn't have the guts or the skill to do this in real life. But in the sim it's really nice that it had the guts, whether it's realistic or not, to go with handling where you can crash at any point if you're steering too much. And it's really a precise act, and sliding is easy. On the brakes it's easy, in mid-corner it's easy, but it's also punished. So you want to be smooth in a thing that is very easy to slide too much. I don't know if that's real karting, but it's very rewarding. It's closer to how I made my karts privately in AMS than any of the other kart games. And I really enjoy it. And the 4-seat back is, like I said, it is very noisy. I wonder if that is realistic or not, but it's super immersive, that you're really sort of getting sweaty. You feel the vibrations through the wheel. If it's clinical and nothing happens, like in Kart Racing Pro or in some of the tracks in AMS where the bumps aren't modeled on some of the karting tracks, then it feels quite sterile in comparison. So, of course, the only thing you want is it to be realistic. And I don't know if this is, but it does give you great immersion and sense that you're on a bumpy, stiff track with in a kart that's stiff. The track is bumpy, the kart is stiff. I think that's English. But I want to do a 54 before wrapping it up. So let's put my head down, more speed that way, and see what we can do. The track is really well made. Possibly laser scanned, I don't know if it is. A lot easier to laser scan a kart track. And I think the licensing will be a lot less expensive than and the length to scan than when you turn up at Spa, the Grand Prix track. So there are benefits. That was like 4/10 quicker than my last lap. Big step. Tighter line. There's, at this rate, probably a few more tenths in it. I'm not absolutely world class. I think if you do the leaderboard thing, 54.0 was the quickest time a while ago. And 7/10 on a kart track is still quite a bit, but I don't think I'm super slow. I think I'm quick enough to judge the game a little bit. So, the most sweaty summary in sim racing history then. First of all, very limited. I'm just looking at this X30 kart, no shifter karts, no front braking karts. I think this is a pure kart. This is the one to look at in various sims and have an opinion on how it drives. So it's a very small part of the game. I am not a real kart racer. I don't fully understand the concept of the vehicle dynamics, but I'm always messing with it in AMS. And this game, this sim, is incredible fun. I think it's more in line with how I make the cars in AMS, so it's very direct, extremely direct, but with the good hardware that we have these days, most of us, well, more of us can afford than ever before. You can actually get a feel for the brakes, super easy to control the braking. That rear end, it never passes me by. I've been doing, it doesn't have a lap counter I think, 80 laps, and I didn't spin once. Very controllable, perhaps even too easy. It starts to, it warns you way in advance about what the rear end is doing. Perhaps that's a little easy, I don't know. Perhaps I'm just really good. 4C back is very noisy, like I said. Track bumps come through a lot, or the chassis vibrates, I don't know what it is. Filtering at 100, lots of inertia and damping in my 4C back, wheel settings, still very busy. I doubt if it's that busy, I don't know. It is very, very engaging, and I'm like, I'm really wrestling this kart on this Belgium racetrack, so it's more than good enough, if perhaps a bit too noisy, especially considering I'm using 100% filtering. The driving experience is mega. What I'm not sure about, and that's the whole thing with cars, I'm just not sure about, and that's why I'm doing all these games, to see if I can find some sort of trend or learn something. It is extremely oversteery and just ever so slightly too much steering lock, and you get a bit too much slide going. And I'm now at minimal caster. I changed it down to 10 degrees, which I think is quite low. I think around 15 is sort of an average for a kart. So what does that imply? I'm a terrible driver. Other things in the kart setup might not be correct. Or perhaps the frame is too stiff. So even with 10 degrees of caster, there's more jacking happening than with a real kart at 15. I don't know. Don't have the data. Not enough data anyway. But all I've been doing with the kart setup is trying to get rid of some of the oversteer, so that I'm more able to keep it from sliding. And that way 54, well, with my talent, only took 80 laps. A young person with a lot of talent probably is as quick or quicker in 20 laps. But I really like this game. Unreal Engine, of course, it is a bit of a power hungry beast. With triples and with VR probably as well. The menus, everything is very easy to use, works very well. Force feedback, frame rate dependent, I mentioned that, that's a downside. Otherwise very direct, very cool. I'm really impressed. I can do this for hours. This is as enjoyable, as engaging as my own AMS carts are to me, with the added bonus of not being frustrated or wondering, you know, what have I done wrong, what number should I enter. Here I can just enjoy driving somebody else's hard work rather than my own and doubt about it. So I can just dial into this game and have a lot of fun. And not just a lot of fun, which I'm sure you can have with a lot of sims, but I feel it is not easy for kart games to get that feeling of weightlessness, like the swing weighs nothing and changes direction so quickly. Bring that feeling across, and I think this does a very good job at it. Again, though, I'm not a real car driver, so this could be all wrong, but the control of the kart, dialing in the oversteer and braking into it feels really natural. It just mimics what you do. So if you would calibrate your wheel to 540 degrees or 360, you would need way too much inputs, and you would be behind and you would be all messy. But I hope you saw that my quick lap was not sliding everywhere, not controlling it. So you have to learn to sort of depend on, build your database of what you know the kart will do, rather than trying to correct it all the time. And sometimes in sim racing people make all sorts of corrections where you doubt if they are actually doing it because it's necessary, or like an old Hollywood movie where there's like a green screen and the guy is always doing like this on the motorway. Probably accurate 1960s American muscle car simulation, by the way, but who knows. Here you really have to only do what is necessary, and it's great. It feels really good. I can lose gallons of sweat in this sim. So limited view of the game, limited hours, limited talent, limited skill, limited knowledge, but very positive. I love this. Curious to hear what you think about this game in the comments as well. So, KartKraft, big thumbs up, big sweaty armpits. That's the stamp of approval from yours truly. On to the next game. Kart Racing Pro, a very old game, as in it's still current, but it's been out for over a decade, I think. Very serious karting sim and loved by some people, yet still quite obscure. So let's have a go. You are looking at MSI Afterburner and its Riva Tuner thing, because it doesn't have an in-game frame rate limiter, and in order to make my G-Sync happy, frame rate has to be limited, but there are tools for that, so that's kind of fine. And when we jump into the game, well, there are some issues. You can see the view here. Well, you can't, that's the kart. There's not enough adjustability for like the vertical position. That was also intuitive and easy with the menus and the HUD and the user interface with KartKraft. This is a bit wooden, a bit old-fashioned, and I cannot adjust the view down, which I would like to do, because steering wheels here might all be correct from a physical point of view where my face is, but I'd just like to adjust it. triple screen works, but it's not individually rendered. So if you angle your screens, which most of you will do, it's because it's warpy. It's a single view stretched. So that shows its age. It does have VR support, and the beauty is we're sitting here at triple screen 1440p on a 2070 Super with 40% GPU usage. Of course, this performance should be probably quite good in VR and triple screen, even though you don't get the unique views. And unlike KartKraft, which looks better, but is a resource hog a bit. Problems with this old game, well, I couldn't assign my inputs, so calibration would only save the last device I calibrated. So I did my steering and then my pedals wouldn't work, did my pedals and then my steering wouldn't work, so I had to do the hardcore sim racing thing of editing a file. In the end it's fine, and you're used to R-Factor and AMS, and messing with a file is sometimes what it takes. Another thing is you can just about see the view moves about a little bit. I think that sort of simulates your driver moving about, but I don't like. I want my view to be sort of fixed, only pitch stabilized a little bit. Big annoyance, I don't know how to get rid of it. You get like blobs on your helmet, and I didn't find a way to turn that off. That's super annoying, and it's ugly and bah. But old game aside, it is praised by people. And let's see what it feels like. At Genk again, I downloaded an X30 mod, version 6. I might put it in an overlay here, what it is. Mod's going to be subjective. This one was somewhat highly regarded apparently. So let's have a few laps here and talk about the physics and the handling of these cards in comparison to KartKraft, which we just played, and it's quite different. Oh, it's really direct. It feels incredibly different to KartKraft. So these are both sims that are loved by real karters probably and gamers, but it's extremely different. So when I do that, it just pushes a little bit, goes into more of a four-wheel slide. I find KartKraft in this setting to be more an exercise in precision, smooth, slow inputs, and the front's always sort of gonna go first, and the rear can go easily enough, but in KartKraft it felt like the rear was always moving around, and here you have to go over a certain amount of steering to get to that point. It is really direct though. And I've been driving touring cars, so I need a lap or two to get used to that. But it feels so different, and I don't care that the graphics are not as pretty because it runs very well, probably even in VR. But there doesn't seem to be any detail in this track model. It seems to be just a completely flat track, and I think, or I could be fooled, the KartKraft version has more detail, has a bit of banking. It feels more like a real track. It also has bumps, or that is just a feature of the KartKraft physics that you feel all those sort of the noisy force feedback. This feels like a billiard table, so it has a lot of liveliness taken out simply from the less detailed track. So it feels very sterile in comparison. And completely different on the brakes as well. Remember in KartKraft I could go straight on the brakes. Okay, that worked, but doing that on corner entry will be difficult. So, or I just picked up a new skill. Let's try that in turn 1. Within KartKraft you sort of could be sideways into turn 1, use the brakes. So I can of course get more used to it, and I do think it's really easy in KartKraft to control the kart on the brakes, but here it is quite difficult when you're turning. The kart isn't stable on the brakes. You have to really get a feel for that. This could well be more realistic or less realistic. Oh, dips down a lot. In all, the thing feels a lot softer here. The frame, the kart feels a lot softer than KartKraft. It tips and it rolls a lot more. Lifts the inside wheel a lot. Very, very different experience. And if you go back to KartKraft now, it feels almost silly how sensitive it is and how oversteery it is. But it is very exciting and fun and controllable. So there you see it did go. It turned a little on the brakes there and I didn't spin. So of course you can learn that. It's just very different in nature. There's a safety zone of steering here where you know you won't get oversteer. The lap times are identical. I also did a 54 earlier. So, and here you cannot, you have to be precise. It's more accepting of the throttle here, whereas in KartKraft, that sort of lifty, not lifty bit there is more oversteery. It's more oversteery everywhere. And remember that is in KartKraft after removing a lot of caster. I was at minimum caster 10 degrees or something. So the base feel of these karts is completely different. And this is just more a precision steering exercise. And I'm not battered by the bumps and in the 4-seat back. So it feels really sterile and it looks really good in replays, the way the karts move. Perhaps they seem to move a bit much, like flex a bit much. And here, yeah, there seems to be perhaps a bit more grip or something than in KartKraft, because I could do that flat out. In KartKraft would make the back step out. Here the back just doesn't step out on throttle or on cornering until you really crank on the steering lock, which is more than 20 degrees. That's cranking it on in a kart. So yeah, it slides a little bit there. So I changed the thing in the car setup to make it a little bit less understeery. I don't really remember what I did. I might post it because I'm such a great video editor. So a very different experience. It looks pretty believable in the TV cameras. And this is just more really precise. I don't think it is quicker to sort of brake sideways into the turns. It feels like there is more braking grip than in KartKraft, but it's also a bit harder to control. I'm on 13 Newton meters here with a lot of damping again. And the 4-seat back is not... It's hard to say, it's not great. It's built up off center fairly fast, but what I'm doing here, I would already steer the kart in KartKraft a lot. So just highlighting some of those differences, not saying what is better, just amazingly different. But if you get oversteer, like it is, the 4-seat back is really wooden and sort of binary. I don't think I'm getting clipping. It doesn't feel like it's instantly up to 30 Newton meters. It does load up when you load up the front. You feel it getting a bit heavier, but it is sort of more like a spring almost. It gets pretty constantly firm. Doesn't seem to be a lot going on, and when it snaps back, it's sort of meh. Feels a bit wooden and a bit fake-ish. But it's fairly firm around center and it's workable. Here as well you can just go flat out and you manage the understeer, and in KartKraft you go kinda not flat out and you manage the oversteer in those turns. Oh yeah, this is bad. It is still fun. It's not as instantly rewarding as KartKraft, because there you're sort of fighting the thing, you know, that tricks you into, with the 4-seat back being so possibly overly bumpy, it does sort of suck you in and I'm a real racing driver, and this feels more clinical. Better not take that curb. But never am I afraid of oversteer, unless, like, I'm always controlling it. Here I'm turning right, I would control the sliding with turning less right. I never have to turn left. Never have to apply actual opposite lock until you do something really stupid. Whereas with KartKraft I felt like I was having to steer straight or perhaps apply just a bit of opposite lock every now and then. It's so different, and that makes me really confused because I'm hoping to learn from all these kart games to see how I can optimize my own kart in AMS. But here I'm being given two completely opposite experiences of what's supposed to be a realistic karting game. So what gives? Only there at the limit I went on the throttle and it went sideways a little bit. Of course I'm a bit rusty. It is quite easy to slide and to catch it. The force feedback feels too late there, that's weird, the way it snaps back. But it's quite controllable. See, it's... I don't think I have the skill yet to smoothly use the brakes to enter the turns, whereas in KartKraft that's stupidly easy. It just feels like there is like a third or more grip from braking. I might check the G-force telemetry when we compare the sims at the end of this big video where I will look at all these kart games, all three of them. It feels like I'm doing, instead of like 1G or 0.90, this is 1.3G or something on brakes. It feels so stable and grippy under braking until it isn't. It doesn't become like a nice glidey opposite lock entry, and you can run out of fuel, I found out, so that's a feature that we have over KartKraft. It feels really soft. In KartKraft, the kart is sort of chattering over the bumps and over the track. It feels really stiff, and here it feels really soft. And there will be some differences between the kart frames, but they're basically all 32mm tubes, and steel isn't that different from one type to another regarding the stiffness. So of course there will be differences between the frames, but this is like, it feels like a factor of 5 difference in stiffness. The difference couldn't be larger. That's why I'm doing this game now after KartKraft, because it struck me how different they are. Force feedback is a little, it is a little less instantly off center than KartKraft. And here it's just being so smooth and avoiding the sliding by slowly applying the steering. So, as far as fun goes, I'm not as immersed and I'm not feeling the force feedback detail. I'm not having to control the car at the limit. I seem to be rewarded for staying below the limit, keeping it in a slight understeer. So you have to be really precise, and that is a challenge, of course. But it's not like the bit between your teeth in KartKraft where you're fighting the thing for 54 seconds, and here you're sort of performing surgery, something really precise for 54 seconds. So both take for 54 seconds, but the way you spend them is, the time is really different. very sort of weirdly binary bouncy force feedback there when I was hopping. Not nice. So the force feedback is extremely constant. When you're being smooth, it's just sort of almost a constant force, fairly firm, a bit grip and load dependent maybe. It's sort of fine. No life because there is no track detail. But once you start hopping, it sort of becomes a wobbly, bouncy, binary left-right oscillation-y force. It's not nice. All the more reason to drive smoothly in this game and not do the exact opposite that you want to do in KartKraft. So I'm very confused. I think you can just tell I'm not enjoying myself half as much as with KartKraft. So we did a 54.7, which is exactly the same lap time. I think I have multiple tenths in there. It's not as enjoyable in my opinion. However, that doesn't tell us anything about the realism. Sometimes sims where you have to be more gentle and smooth and precise are more realistic in the sense that that's typically how you probably drive in real life. But why do you do that in the game and why do you do that in real life? There might be different reasons. Perhaps in real life you can go sideways everywhere and it's not necessarily difficult for a good driver to do it, but you smoke the tires, you wear out, I don't know, parts of the car. It's just not the quickest way to race. And in some sims, in my opinion, and I just hope they keep improving, but in iRacing, for example, you're also really sort of encouraged to stay between the lines, like draw between the lines, be really smooth and precise, and like a repetitive robot, you can be extremely fast. And in many ways that is realistic, because you probably want to drive like that a lot of the time in real life. But I think sometimes in real life you can overdrive, but you're doing it for reasons that you're not doing it before, for reasons of keeping the car in one piece and keeping the tires alive. So a sim that forces you to drive smoothly is realistic in some ways, but perhaps not realistic if it doesn't allow you to overdrive realistically. Here I'm not so sure. Like with KartKraft, it encourages me to overdrive all the time, which is just engaging, and that's what I find fun in sim racing, is taking a car or cart by the scruff of a neck and, man, how? I'm doing 4 miles an hour and I got a blob. Blob. It's exciting at least, but this isn't as much. Whether one game is better than the other, I cannot really tell. I think in some ways KartKraft is probably more realistic, that you do use the brakes more to enter the turns, and there is more, I think there is probably more oversteer in a well set up kart some of the time, and here it's really safe and sort of understeery, and there's not as much immediacy off center, and then it just builds up, and then you have that zone of understeer. Before eventually you can almost hear the wooden force seat back there. So it will eventually turn around and get into oversteer, but it's so different. So it's challenging, it's rewarding your smoothness, which is probably a good thing to teach a car driver, not to be sideways everywhere. So it could be very useful for that. I just don't find it engaging and rewarding from a I've just been a pretend excellent car driver feel. It's more, no, I managed to stay to color within the lines, I managed to stay precise and accurate, and that's why I did a 54 rather than I was at the limit 53 out of the 54 seconds, which is how you feel in KartKraft. But which of these two is more realistic? They're extremely far apart, and I'm sure you can find pretty decent car drivers who prefer KartKraft and others who prefer Kart Racing Pro. It just shows you the incredible spread there is between there's one reality, an X30 kart at Genk, and then the interpretation of two sims that try their best to be realistic is completely different. So I haven't learned anything really for my own karts other than I'm having a decent time trying out these games. So does this game deserve a longer look? Perhaps. I did try some of the included carts and they're kind of the same. It's like so night and day versus KartKraft that no mod, I think, or no setting in Kart Racing Pro will bring it closer to KartKraft, and no setting or adjustments to KartKraft will bring it closer to Kart Racing Pro. They seem fundamentally super different. So yeah, I'm not really feeling like doing it for much longer. Not as impressed with Kart Racing Pro as I hoped I would be. There is more to find in practice and everything, but it's very entertaining to see the KartKraft, Kart Racing Pro polar opposites. You almost thought I wouldn't mention the throttle model. I think it is just like KartKraft and just like old RF1. Low revs. At a would expect more torque, like a 50% throttle at low revs. I would expect to be accelerating a lot quicker than I am. So this is one of those cases where I blame all the sims in existence for being wrong. So perhaps I am wrong, but it does feel like the engine model is not doing the low RPM, low throttle percentage torque the way I would expect it to be. So yeah, just in case you thought I wouldn't mention it. The reason why I think KartKraft is also a better achievement is because in my experience, and perhaps doing modding and RF1 and AMS for 14 or so years, making a car understeery is always easier to control than making an oversteery car easy and challenging to control. And what KartKraft manages to do is provide you with a near crash for 54 seconds, but you're never crashing. I haven't spun in KartKraft yet. I've always been on the limit. Again, I don't know if that's realistic, but from a game design point of view, sliding it back into the turns at full control, giving it a bit too much steering, the rear goes out, a bit of opposite lock. It's very exciting, and I think it's also a difficult thing to achieve in a game. And here it is sort of a weird mix, because it's really easy to drive, just avoid steering too much. At some point you'll get oversteer, but there's a safe zone here, a guaranteed scrub up as little speed as you can. And otherwise you're fine, you're not gonna be fighting the thing, it's just precise control, which is completely different than KartKraft. But then on the brakes it is 10 times more difficult. So this is the thing that tends to be the case with sims that are safer and understeery. Once you start sliding, they become very hard to control. Whereas a sim that is more difficult, I think, to make, that is encourages you to be at that absolute limit where the back starts to go and don't know if it's realistic or not, but when it goes and you're in control, I think it's a more difficult thing to do in a sim. And I think KartKraft scores higher there, and this is more do exactly this and you'll be fast. And in KartKraft you can sort of feel more in control. You're drawing something, and here you're just staying within, you're coloring in within the lines. So interesting, totally different experience. Like I said, the benefits, of course, triple screen, no individual rendering, but excellent performance. My GPU is 60 degrees, 48% usage, 120 FPS. You know, the VR performance I expect to be great as well. So that's two huge pluses for this game compared to KartKraft, which is very heavy on the system. Looks a lot nicer, of course. But yeah, force feedback, sort of a linear spring-ish and a very delayed and wooden when it does get wobbly. The kart physics, very soft and sort of bouncy. Bouncy as in like it does this instead of that. So yeah. It does feel that the kart is actually light, though. It doesn't feel woolly and sort of dancey. I mean, it does feel like it is nearly weightless thing, it's just like it's a soft nearly weightless thing. Does that help you? Probably not. So I think what's left now is to try KartSim in the RF2 DLC. So let's do that and see if we can learn anything there. KartSim then. This is an add-on DLC, 40 euros for RF2. In many ways this is not too bad. It's 40 euros. You do get quite a few tracks. They seem to be alright. I haven't driven them all because I downloaded Genk again so we can compare. The setups is really limited. I mean this UI. There's a lot of stuff locked. You cannot change. You can change the gearing. You cannot change a lot with the chassis. Nope, nothing. So it's very locked down. So in a sense, yes, you get some cards and some tracks, that's alright, but that deliberate sort of lockdown of the setup, you have to get their pro software for the real driver training experience. That just leaves a bit of a sour taste initially already. Still, for a game experience, I wouldn't say it's bad. So not a lot to adjust here, not even adjust caster. It's really sort of artificially limited. I don't think for a 40 euro game, even though you get content, it should be that limited. So this is my first time. Instantly, this does not feel like a kart. Look at my steering lock, 45 degrees. That's not, no. It feels like it has... It's not just a lack of direct steering. It feels like it's 5 times the inertia, if not 10 times. It's really sluggish to change direction. I don't like this at all. That steering lock is just so weird. It feels like slow motion with that. See how slow it's like You can get nicely sideways on the brakes. So even though I've only done half a lap, we can already say that KartKraft and then Kart Racing Pro, completely different. KartSim, another one of those professional, like, there will be car drivers who use this and are very happy with it. But it is completely different from the other two again. So I cannot learn anything from this. 4-seat is instantly... feels like 4-seat, unlike Kart Racing Pro. It's not as spiky as KartKraft was, but you do feel the road. You get a bit of that texture, and that isn't like, it doesn't mean it's a good sim or a bad sim, but it immerses you when there's a bit of detail, and the curbs as well. And the 4-seat when the sliding happens, feels fine. Oh man. I'm not enjoying this. Of course I've been negative, or at least not negative, well, perhaps about the tire model in RF2. Because it's so advanced, it's hard to work with, but underneath it is very good. The way the things it does, it's super impressive, and perhaps for karting, where the sidewall stiffness and all the movements and everything and the contact patch is less damped because there is no suspension almost. This could work really well, but why do I need 45 degrees of steering? Well, I will do a trick later, and perhaps that bouncing as well. It's slow. It feels super heavy. Controllable. But that's a bit cheating. I mentioned that in KartKraft the carts feel very light, very agile, which I think that's what they are. But also controllable. In Kart Racing Pro they do feel light. They are controllable, but not so naturally beyond the limit on the brakes and sliding. And here, yes, it's very controllable, but it feels like the inertia, the yaw inertia should be like 50, and it feels like it's 250. Super sluggish. And that steering lock. So yes, you can achieve controllability that way. but I don't believe the numbers here are of real carts. Is that a problem? Well, going back to that vibe that KartSim gives off, like look at us, we're so professional. I think you would expect real numbers to be in the sim. However, that is not necessarily true. If the tracks are good and the drivers are happy learning the tracks and learning the lines, it is still a sim in a way. But I think these days you can also get that functionality of training the drivers with real numbers. And RF2, look how slow that was, how sluggish that was. RF2 is more than capable of modeling a kart way better, I think, than this, with actually realistic numbers and still being controllable. I don't know the numbers, of course it is all locked. Perhaps all the numbers are real, but I'm a bit confused now that KartSim is so different to the others. Anyway, that's a bit of a ranty thing. What I'm gonna do now, and perhaps they recommend this in, if I would actually read the documentation, set my steering sensitivity 200%. That should help. Might make the force feedback spasm.
Data logging enabled.
Oh yes, it definitely makes the force feedback spasm. That's not a great sign. It is only 30 Newton meters. It doesn't even feel like it isn't 30 Newton meters off center. It's a lot less, yet it's still out of control. That's the thing when you make the steering so much more sensitive. Any slight input is actually doubled. But let's see if this feels a little bit better. Still got vibraty force feedback. So this definitely fixes the required steering lock. I hope that's what they say in the manual. And I was just not paying attention to my purchase, which is my bad, of course. You always have to face the fact you might have to read something. I hope they do. Maximum sensitivity on the steering axis. At least fixes the steering lock to something fairly reasonable. At the expense of vibrating force feedback. As with a lot of damping in my wheel utility, so it's not that. And doing this at 25 Newton meters would be like a death rattle. It would be very scary. So a bit of a shame you cannot really run the high force feedback without making it a vibrator. That's quite scary at some point. So let's see if we can get good at this, at least reasonably good. Initial impressions are poor. But now with the steering sensitivity fixed, that is such a big part of kart racing that you don't need steering lock. So before I get good, another thing that I'm just noticing is that the engine torque seems very linear. Like, it should have sort of come in at 8, 9-ish. It also goes right to 16, and I have never seen an onboard of an X30 kart where they go straight to 16,000. So it sounds like there is too much low-down torque and also perhaps too much high-end torque. But I don't know for sure, it's just different from the other games. You don't feel a bump in the torque curve, like it does nothing until 8-ish. It's very linear. Like, just all the torque until like 12, 13,000, and it drops a little bit. I don't think what this torque curve should look like, but rear end control on the brakes is definitely there, which is nice. Makes me think that Kart Racing Pro really is too difficult on that front. And just in general, the force feedback, giving some detail compared to Kart Racing Pro. Without the big... Ow, this is just the track modeling, the curves are not right. Noise without being big spikes, whereas KartKraft gave us the big spikes. So but do be setting that steering sensitivity to 200%, otherwise it's silly. And you do get the big vibrations, so that's not great either, so perhaps it's more tight with KartKraft, which was stable. It's not a big deal once you're driving and holding the wheel. I don't get vibrations. When you let go of the wheel, it starts to vibrate. Let's not take those curbs. Got a V8 engine torque curve, it feels like. And labeling this as simulation when should that be true? I think I can actually get the torque curve out of the telemetry. So we will do some comparison of torque curves and side-by-side acceleration videos. I think that could be interesting. Bear in mind, these circuits will not be one-to-one comparable. In Automobilista and RF1 there is a version of Buckmore, nice track. However, it's 150 meters too long in the R-Factor version. So yeah, your lap time is not gonna be right. So I don't know how accurate this track is, and it might even be different from KartKraft and Kart Racing Pro. They are definitely different models. So comparing lap times on a different track is So after quite a few laps, down to a 56.5, and you saw that was fairly messy, so definitely some tense in there, but it's slower than the other two sims for unknown reasons. Could be track length, could be grip levels, hard to say. This is another very weird experience. Again, quite different from KartKraft and Kart Racing Pro. The sluggishness is what I initially felt most disturbing. It's fixed, masked a bit by using 100% sensitivity on the steering, makes it more direct, but there is a feeling of sluggishness in this kart that is not quite there in the other two games, where yes, they feel very different, the other two games, but they are also sort of lightweight kart, and here it feels slides take long and changes of direction are not as insanely fast as I would expect. A big problem is you cannot, very big problem, you cannot lock the rear axle instantly. I'm at 100% brake pressure in the car setup, one of the very few things you actually can adjust. But it especially at speed, which is a little weird because it shouldn't matter. Pressing fully, it takes a while for the revs to drop. It doesn't lock instantly, which is weird and pretty bad, because you want to control the rear axle, and if you want to lock it now, you want to lock it now. Perhaps sort of a driving aid, because if you cannot instantly lock, it's easier in a way, but not for a good driver who wants that ability and has the skill to control it. The game should always allow you to lock the tires instantly if it is remotely possible in the real car. And it's sort of a cheat, making it too easy, but worse by making the brakes on the weak side. And there's no reason why they couldn't have increased the strength. And I think it's controllable, because the braking is pretty good in the sense that you can brake into the turns. But here when you hobble over those curves sometimes, like the kart is sort of a, yes, it's bouncy, and real cars are surely bouncy, but it feels like it's too heavy. It's bouncing for sluggishly, so perhaps the weight isn't accurate, or the inertias, because the inertias are the resistance to the change of direction. What is that noise? So perhaps the inertias are where, yes, are too high, weight is too high, I don't know. You can do a double the weight kart with double the power and it would feel the same in a straight line, but sluggish elsewhere, although it's mainly the inertias that cause this sluggish feel, and also when braking and accelerating and bouncing over curves, feeling more like a car than like a kart. The force feedback is quite alright if it's not vibrating, which is a big issue, especially if you want to run it in real driver training mode. You want like 20 Newton meters, and if it becomes a vibrator, perhaps there are some settings that fix it, but that's a bit of the downside, you know. It's part of RF2. It feels like a mod, because it's integrated into the RF2 amazing UI. Oh, not amazing. And if you have to adjust certain settings, it feels like a mod, and it also drives like a half decent mod. It doesn't feel like, oh, this is a professional simulator. It's I don't know the numbers, right? I cannot look under the hood, but it feels to me like they fudged the numbers until, yes, it's a lot of fun to drive, and the braking feels pretty good, and you can control the slides and stuff, so it's decent. But it feels like they got there with almost a random set of parameters. I don't know, I don't have the numbers, but it doesn't feel as kart-like KartKraft or Kart Racing Pro did to me. This feels more like a light car instead of a kart. You do get the laser scanned tracks, which I have not tried. I'm just focusing on the handling on Tank here, which is a mod. So you can have plenty of hours of fun with it. The incredibly restricted car setup is a bit of a cheap, you know, it leaves a sour taste in my mouth. Yes, this is the esports package, and if you want the real driver training, you have to go with their 500 euros or 1000 euro packages. It's fishy. A good mod could be better than this, but the tracks are very important for driver training, and it's super important. I'm a bit negative about what I think the physics might be. Driver training isn't just about the most accurate physics. It's whatever. Well, so it could be, and it should probably be. But if whatever physics you're using make a driver drive in the certain way that he's supposed to be driving in the real thing, and it works, and he learns the tracks, and it tends to work for him, that is also a good driver training simulator, even if the cars are not realistic. However, I firmly believe that the best driver training is also done with the best physics, with the most real numbers. But karts are not easy, and I can understand that it's difficult to make them drivable, and that's where I'm coming back to KartKraft. They are easy to drive. I don't know if it's realistic at all, but easy to drive at and over the limit, and I don't think any fudging is going on in KartKraft to make the cars heavier or more sluggish in rotation, or increase the grip or decrease the strength of the brakes. That doesn't seem to be going on at all. In Kart Racing Pro as well, I don't think there's any fakeness programmed in. It feels extremely different to KartKraft, but it feels like it isn't deliberately adjusted. And here it kind of feels like they just deliberately adjusted. It feels like they just went with feedback more than with data, which is valid. It's just, as a physics guy, I prefer to arrive at a happy racing drivers without fudging too much, and it feels a bit fudged and not really with like real card numbers. But again, I cannot look under the hood. The lack of car setup options is a bit tragic, and this whole it leaves a bit of a bad taste in my mouth for the price, especially the Pro version, that you do that. I mean, of course, compared to going through the ranks in karting, if you buy your kit the KartSim with this software, it's nothing in the grand scheme of things, but you get RF2 that you have to set up properly because the game doesn't do it for you. You have to set it up manually with the steering sensitivity and stuff like that. Yes, then you can have a good sim, but it feels like a mod. It's only the tracks that are, I think, worth some money, and I think it's 8 tracks for 40 euros. You know, in iRacing you pay a lot more, so that's, in many ways, it's not bad, yes, and it is fun, and there is reasonably good kart control doubt the physics side of this game. But the esports software, 10 tracks, 4 cards, decent. As a game experience, no problem. This is the torque curve in blue. So RPM here, torque, normalized. I don't know the actual Newton meters, but I can normalize it. Taken from the telemetry of the various games. So first, the real data, X30 dyno, it's the orange line here, which is just one dyno plot. Many dynos will work a bit differently, so I'm not saying it's accurate, but at least it's from a reputable source. I think they do a lot of engine work, dyno work. So that's the shape of the real engine. When I put that engine in AMS and I use the same method to find the torque curve as I do in KartSim, I get this gray line. So you can see the method to extract the torque curve from the telemetry is pretty good, because when I do that in AMS I get, well, except at low revs, I get good match with the real data that I actually put in the sim. So my way of getting the torque curve out of the telemetry works. KartSim, look at the difference. The torque, like I explained in the video, it feels like you got a V8 motor. Torque ramps up at about 7,000, it's already basically maximized, and then it starts to drop. So the engine response, we don't have the real data at low rev, so I don't know what, I've just made a flat curve in AMS here. But look, we have like 96% torque, where I would have 63% torque. And this is your real data, so this is not engine dyno data that I've seen. It's very unlikely that the torque band of the kart is this wide. I think here is some hard evidence that it's just not likely that the X30 in KartSim has an engine torque data from real data, if this is real data. I've only seen one set of real data, I could be wrong. Interesting as well, the yellow line is the torque curve from the X30 engine from Kart Racing Pro. Very different again to both KartSim and the real dyno data. And I also said in the game review that you can hit 16,000 RPM with KartSim and also in Kart Racing Pro, but not in KartKraft and also not in my engine. You see the dyno doesn't go beyond 13,000, so I just predicted this shape. I don't know it, but it seems to be having a lot more torque remaining at high RPM, because I don't think I've seen many onboard videos where they just hit the rev limiter. Skeptical about marketing with the claims of laser scanning, with the real data. This is some evidence that no, this is a very, very unlikely, not impossible, but very unlikely to be actual X30 engine torque data. So you've reached the end of the video, hopefully, that's the only thing. Conclusions, very, very hard. I've mentioned it across the video multiple times, just how different each kart sim is. I have no doubt that all these 3 developers had the same goal, make a realistic, no compromise kart sim. But the experience is completely different. KartKraft, easy to control at and over the limit. Very slidey though, very direct, a very stiff feeling frame. Minimal caster already makes it move around a lot. Kart Racing Pro, easy to drive as well, but very hard to control the braking at the limit. Feels very soft in the frame. It does feel responsive, it doesn't feel like it's a heavy thing, it's just a bit sort of more softly sprung, if you may say so, compared to KartKraft. Does react quickly, does feel like a lightweight kart, but feels completely different and more sort of safe understeery, less dramatic. KartSim, once you set it up better, you get decent controllability. It feels softly sprung, and it also feels 4 times heavier than the other games. So the feel is completely different, and also showed you a bit of a torque curve at the end, where you can see that the Kart Racing Pro torque curve is very different from the KartSim torque curve and very different from real data. So with the same aim, and this happens all the time in sims, the aim is the same, the outcome of a GT3 car in iRacing, RF2, ACC feels quite different. Just shows you how difficult it is to make a sim, how subjective it is at so many fronts with the data that comes in, the subjective feedback of drivers. Can I pick a winner? Well, it's also going to be subjective. I enjoy KartKraft the most, because I enjoy being at that limit and having that control, and I think it's a good achievement, like I said in the video, that making us a thing in a game easy to overdrive is more difficult than just making a high grip understeery experience that is difficult once it starts to slide. Kart Racing Pro is a bit like that. You have to be very precise, it feels alright, but once it starts to slide you sort of lose that sense of control a bit. So as a game programming and physics experience, I think KartKraft beats Kart Racing Pro. That does not mean it's realistic, because perhaps the driving style in KartKraft is too slidey, and perhaps you want to drive more like you do in Kart Racing Pro. So even if the physics would be possibly more realistic in KartKraft, the application to real-world karting might be better in Kart Racing Pro, even if it might be inferior in some areas. You know, these things are very complicated. And that leads us to KartSim, which I have been quite critical about, but once something rubs me the wrong way, I tend to sort of not be able to let go of that. Just the esports package is fine. It's fun to play, it's controllable, you get a decent amount of tracks, so that's a pretty good experience. It does feel a lot heavier and sluggish compared to the others, which I don't prefer. I think the challenge, and especially RF2, has that ability. I think the physics engine is more than capable to create carts that are as drivable, as controllable as KartKraft, but they seem to have used driver feedback. Perhaps the drivers might be more happy. The drivers might get a better experience training with KartSim than they do with KartKraft. But as a physics guy, from my perspective, I don't really care too much about what a driver said. I want to see if the numbers are correct. And from that point of view, I'm not a big fan of KartSim, but that does not mean that it might not be the best for driver training. I don't know, it just feels too heavy, too artificially slowed down to make it controllable, rather than have the good physics that are responsive and super direct, but good enough that they're still controllable. And of course, well, the professional package, I had some things to say about that, but that's not really the scope of this video. For you consumers, I think all three of these sims are just interesting to try, worth having. If you enjoy karting, you will get hours of enjoyment out of each. So there is no real clear winner, and now the point will be, how do I take this knowledge, which is just fake because it's all over the place, to AMS and improve the carts there? So I don't know yet. I hope to spend a lot of time tweaking my kart in AMS. I've already made the rear axle better, the steering geometry better. I wonder if I can get to the point where I can get that on the limit controllability of KartKraft, perhaps being a little less high frequency, bouncy and oversteery, at the same time stiffer than Kart Racing Pro, easier at the limit. Controlling the brakes on entry and stuff is something I really want, but just with keeping good control. I'm not sure if I can achieve that, but I'm thinking now, and I will try to make a better AMS version. I will also, if it works out reasonably well, upload that AMS version, hopefully before the holidays, but who knows, time is always running out very quickly, so you can try my updated AMS version at some point later this year. That's running out, and I don't have a watch, but I'm an excellent actor, so I'm watching my non-existent watch. So, very long video. I hope you did enjoy it and get some information about the current state of kart sims, even though the conclusion is sort of like a bit like that again. Thanks for watching though, and well, hang around hopefully for the AMS kart that is superior in all ways except most of them.